Hi, welcome to Brown Girl Book Lover. I'm Leslie Ann Murray. Today I have Jessamine Chan, debut writer. Well, she's not a debut writer. She's been writing for a long time, but debut novelist of this really good book, The School of Good Mothers. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Jessamine. Jessamine Chan's stories have appeared in Tin House and Epoch. A former review editor at Publishers Weekly, she holds an MFA from Columbia University. She lives in Chicago with her family. The School of Good Mothers is her first novel. Welcome to Brown Girl Book Lover.
Thank you so much for having me on your show.
First of all, thank you for shouting out Crown Heights in your book. I live in Crown Heights. So I was like,
I actually used to live in Flatbush, so I have not actually lived in Crown Heights myself, but I understand it is where all the cool people live.
Yes. Well, yeah. Jessamine, tell us about your novel.
Sure. The School for Good Mothers is about a Chinese-American single mom named Frida Liu who loses custody of her toddler daughter after having one very bad day. And in order to get her daughter back, she's sent to a newly created government institution where she's re-educated with mothers from around the county. It's set in Philadelphia and the surrounding suburbs. And there's the school that she goes to ends up holding about 200 mothers. So I think of it as kind of like 1984, but for moms. And readers are following Frida's journey, not just to get her daughter back, but also to hold on to her integrity while being indoctrinated.
And tell us, how did you come up with the concept? Because it's really radical.
Oh, thank you. It's funny having to turn the genesis of the book into a story during book promotion, because this is it makes it sound like this happens to me all the time, but actually I'm 44 and I've been writing since I was 18, so I've certainly had my share of fallow periods and also misses along the way. But the way this book came about was I had one really good writing day in early 2014, which is now so long ago that it's almost like I'm telling you about 30 years ago rather than 8 or 9. So at that time I was trying to come up with ideas for short stories and was working diligently on a short story collection. And I really thought a short story collection would have been my first book. But I was coming up with new story ideas, and I'd taken 2 weeks of vacation to go stay at a friend's house in upstate New York, because I was going to try to go to a residency, but I didn't get into McDowell and Yaddo again. And so I just went to kind of a self-created residency at my friend's house. And so I was in total isolation, and I was having one terrible story idea after another. And then near the end of that 2 weeks, I had a really good writing day where I wrote for about 6 hours. And that ended up becoming the foundation of the book, even though at the time I just thought I was writing a really weird short story. Because I'm not the kind of person who sits down and thinks, I have started a novel today, and this will be my project for the next 6 or 7 years of my life. I wish I could approach writing with that kind of ego and audacity, but that's just not how I think of writing. So I ended up during that day drafting what became Frida and Harriet's whole story from start to finish. The Gust and Susanna subplot, the Tucker subplot, the women in pink lab coats, the dolls, the school. So pretty much all the meat of the book was in that very early draft. But I will say that kind of burst of inspiration had never happened to me before. And I just needed it to happen several more times during my life, even if it doesn't arrive fully formed that way. It was certainly a stroke of luck. But the things that fed into that good writing day were the fact that I was entering my late 30s, and it was time to make a decision about having a child. And I certainly felt that time pressure is quite crushing, because my husband and I didn't feel ready. We were living in Brooklyn, where having a kid feels kind of impossible. And I didn't have a book out yet. I wasn't in the place where I thought career-wise I would be at the time of having a child. So those questions were weighing on me quite heavily, and I was thinking about motherhood all the time. And the other thread of inspiration was that I had read a New Yorker article by Rachel Aviv a few months before I had that good writing day. And that article is called "Where is Your Mother?" And it's about a single mom who leaves her toddler son at home for a stretch of time. The neighbors call the police, and after that day, she never gets him back. It's an incredibly tragic story, and I think the thing that surprised me after I read that story and after I did some research for what would become my novel was that that story is one of many, and I think I didn't understand that the very broken child welfare system in America actually removes thousands of children from their parents every year. It's happening all around us.
Many reviewers felt that your novel is dystopian, and I felt it's less dystopian and more of a reflection of our government and state overreach, right? In our country and everywhere else. I wanted you to talk about, do you think your novel is dystopian? Why are they considering it dystopian when this is such a reflection of what we're going through right now?
The government overreach and the surveillance is probably quite true to life. I would guess dystopian comes in because of the technology in the book. And so it's dystopian. It's using dystopian speculative elements. I think a reviewer or interviewer referred to it as dystopian-esque. And I think I'm going to go with that.
Yes.
I was really struggling last January when I started doing interviews to try to explain the dystopian elements. And I was saying it's kind of minimalist world building. And I used this really clunky description that I called it dystopian minimalism, which is a terrible, very terrible first time author doing book promo, doesn't know what she's doing kind of description. So I think I'm going to go with dystopian-esque or mildly dystopian or something like that, because it doesn't follow the conventions of a true dystopian novel, because the world is so much like ours.
Which I love, because it's this could happen. This can definitely happen, which I think was intriguing me to read more and more and more, because it doesn't follow the conventions of it.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I think what I found in talking to readers is I don't know if it's made completely clear until you read the acknowledgments and some of the books and articles I referenced, but the phenomenon of the tragedy of the government taking your children away is something that happens in real life. And being under the watch of Child Protective Services, or having to go to parenting classes and have to fulfill this impossible series of steps, that's the kernel of that is real, even if I took it to a more surreal place.
Yeah. And thinking about that, one of my questions, one second, when Frida gets to this school, she noticed that it's mostly Black and brown moms, a few white moms sprinkle in. And I think this is one of the charms of the novel. And the writing is that it's a sharp critique of race and class without saying this is about race and class.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying that. I was trying really hard to not to have it be eating a plate of broccoli or something, to have my ideas baked into the prose or baked into the actual storytelling, rather than saying here are the points I want to make.
And how were you able to do that? So how were you able to finesse that? I feel like it's really finessing.
Oh, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate hearing that, because it's I don't know, writing about race and class, it goes wrong in so many ways. So to hear from any readers that any of it rang true is the best thing. It is a lot of finessing and a lot of trying to figure things out in editing, and in revision. I just wanted to I guess say what I wanted to say in as few words as possible, and not hammer my points over and over and over again. Also, I really made an effort to make sure that all the characters, and especially the characters of color, got to be fully developed, like as much as you can with a fictional character. I didn't want them to be noble, and I didn't want any of the characters of color to serve an educational purpose. Like, I didn't want to be like, this is the woman of color in the book who teaches Frida about X, Y, and Z. Like, I didn't want them to serve that like educating friend role that you see so much of in all media.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly in a lot of books, Frida would have been the Asian friend who educates the white character about such and such injustice in the world. So I wanted the characters to all have the messiness of life available to them. Like, I wanted them to be like selfish and annoying and like unable to follow the rules and fighting with each other. Like, I didn't want them to be just perfect and good in the way that you sometimes see with characters of color.
Okay, so Black writers and writers of color have always written against a single story, but often reviewers, agents, and publishers tend to group it in as an Asian story, as a Black story, as an immigrant story. And then this novel, Frida exists at multiple crossroads, right? She's not reduced to this trope. And she has all the complexities. And I love that you were able to do that.
Oh, thanks so much. That's wonderful to hear. I think Frida is a complex character because I allowed her to be a mess. Like, she's really neurotic. She's quite self-obsessed. She's quite selfish. She's desirous. She's depressed and lonely. And she's a character who yearns for connection. I think my agent put it the best, because I mean, my agent Meredith Kefel-Simonoff I wish she could do all my interviews for me, because she speaks so much more lucidly and eloquently about the book. But she said that Frida is a character yearning for love. And so I think that is what makes her feel real in that way, because I mean, we're all yearning for connection, and we all feel alone in a certain way. And she's someone who's like really struggled to feel comfortable in her own skin, and she always is an outsider in every way. But the outsider perspective is actually really useful to write from, because you get to see everything, and the hypersensitive outsider perspective, where you feel like everyone's watching you and judging you, is actually a good vantage point for fiction.
Yeah. And she's not outside because she's living this dual life of being like, American born and Chinese. She's outsider because of so many other things, right? Which is really, really great. And, I think like in the past, when I would read novels by writers of color, many felt they needed to represent everyone, right? I need to represent Caribbean writers. I need to represent all Asian writers and have this model minority character. How did it feel to like loosen the strings and be like, you know what, Frida is going to be messy and she's not going to represent everything about Asian American. She's just going to represent this Asian American woman who is just going through this thing right now.
Well, I mean, the umbrella term Asian American it's just so complicated, because there's so many ethnicities under that umbrella, and some groups of people who've been at war for years and things like that. So I thought of the story as like quite a specifically Chinese story, and I think sometimes when you write something really specific, it ends up being more universal in a way. I think if I had tried to represent Asian Americans, I'm not sure that I would have even gotten that right. But certainly I lifted a lot from my own childhood growing up Chinese American in the Midwest, and my own experience as a Chinese American woman in the world, and my experience as like a first generation American, and my struggles with like passing on my heritage to my daughter. So there was a lot of life that I drew from in terms of ways of being and ways of looking at the world. But it's certainly a representation is like kind of a heavy burden in a way. And I think I tried really hard not to think about it, and to hope that my heart was in the right place.
What are 2 takeaways would you like readers to gain from your book?
Oh, I mean, I'm just grateful to anyone devoting time in their busy lives to reading my book. So first takeaway is that I'm very grateful and send my thanks. I think I would love for readers to come away from the book wanting to learn more about I guess the real life parallels. I just read if I could do anything again, I would fill in this gap in my research. I wish I had read about the work of the law professor Dorothy Roberts earlier in my journey to researching this topic. I just read her book Torn Apart, which is the perfect nonfiction companion to this book. I also really recommend the book Small Animals by Kim Brooks. So there are some, I think, really like interesting nonfiction companion reads, and I hope that readers will reflect on the way our government and society treats women, especially mothers. I mean, I wouldn't have ever guessed that my book would be published at a time when women's rights were so under attack. Because I mean, who could have imagined the dystopian nature of our world right now? I mean, I don't think any dystopian novel can actually capture the dystopia of 2023 just in the world, like just existing day to day. So I hope that I hope that the book ignites their curiosity and compassion.
Jessamine Chan, thank you so much for joining me on Brown Girl Book Lover to talk about your novel, The School of Good Mothers. I really like this book, authentically like this book. Like,
thank you so much.
And thank you for this great conversation. I really like your humility. Thank you so much. It's so refreshing and I appreciate it. And, more and more successes for you.
Thank you.